So before this video starts, you're going to see in this video that I'm more scruffy and the hair's longer. That's because I filmed this a couple weeks ago before I got my hair cut, and there was a lot of stuff that happened that I wanted to talk about before releasing this video. So this one's a little older. This will probably be the last video for a while where you see me with long hair and a scruffy beard, probably up until about the year-end list in December when I start letting that shit grow out again. But that's just not necessarily a warning, but before people start to ask the question, wait, I thought you got a haircut, why is your hair and beard so long? That's why it was one of the last videos I filmed before I got my hair cut. So there's the answer to your question. Anyway, enjoy the video.
Well then, if it's color we need, let's bring the rainbow.
Bring the rainbow, is that a catchphrase or something?
She's only been a Thor for a minute. I mean, saving lives she's quite good at, but the rest of it she needs work.
So when it comes to bad comic book movies, I think Batman and Robin is always in the back of everyone's mind, at least for this generation, because it's kind of one of the more, not necessarily newer superhero movies. It's 25 years old, but it's still kind of fresh and out there. There's been some bad comic book movies to follow it, but maybe not as bad as what Batman and Robin had to offer. But recently, in the MCU, there's been a movie that's been kind of compared to it. And the MCU isn't known for making terrible movies. I think the lowest rated movie in the MCU is Eternals at a 47%. Other than that, everything remains to be in like the high 60s and above, and they even have some really high-ranked 90-plus movies in there. And with Marvel's Phase 4, it has been kind of weak. After Endgame, it's just been very 50-50. I mean, aside from the 2 Spider-Man movies, and maybe even Multiverse of Madness, there hasn't been anything I watched where I was like, that's really, really fantastic, aside from, again, Spider-Man No Way Home, but there's reasons for that other than just it's a good movie. The most recent MCU movie is Thor Love and Thunder, the 4th installment of the Thor franchise that started back in 2011, I believe, and now 11 years later, we're back with Chris Hemsworth reprising his role again, and it seems like there's going to be more Thor, as at the end of the 4th movie, it said Thor will return, kind of hinting to us that Thor's not done with. We are going to continue down that path, and a lot of people have compared this movie to that of Batman and Robin in 1997, mainly because, well, hey, ironically, it's the 4th installment of a pretty big franchise, and it was coming off one where fan reception was actually pretty great. People really loved Thor Ragnarok after the first 2 movies weren't necessarily received all that well and seen as 2 of the worst Marvel movies or MCU movies out there. A lot of people had high hopes that Love and Thunder can be at the same level that Ragnarok was, and I mean, obviously this follows up after Endgame when everything's gone and Thor is now with the Guardians of the Galaxy, but he ends up just leaving them because now with Gore the God Butcher out there, he's gotta go, you know, save all the gods that aren't dead yet, save himself as well from Gore basically wiping the whole entire existence of gods out there. And for what it is, I mean, it's got a, I think if you look at Rotten Tomatoes, a 66%, so it's not necessarily terrible, but it is one of MCU's lower rated movies. It's about right where the first 2 Thor movies were when it came to rating and how people viewed it. And people are talking about this like it's one of the worst things they've watched, and to me, I feel like that's a little harsh on a movie like this, because obviously the critics didn't think it was terrible, and even the audience isn't necessarily like hating it. I mean, sure, there's parts in it where you're just like, oh god, why? But for the most part, I still found it enjoyable in this case. Not as enjoyable as Ragnarok, but the moments were there. And I think the fact that Thor was just back to being Thor was a pretty cool thing, as in Ragnarok, things kind of got out of hand, and then by Infinity War and Endgame, he had just become so distraught and depressed that they lost the battle that, you know, he just kind of lost himself. In this movie, it's him trying to find himself again, trying to realize, hey, I'm this person, and I'm gonna stick to being creating this person, I am Thor, and by the end of the movie, he's now a parental figure to Gore's daughter, who he did promise to take care of when Gore finally, passed on from his illness and whatnot. So now Thor's taking on that responsibility, and I think it's pretty nice that they kept the character and his story going, and they continued to grow it in another way instead of just, doing the same thing over and over again with it. And he kept Valkyrie in charge of New Asgard because Thor still doesn't see himself as a leader, but he'll still give the feedback and all that kind of stuff, but he doesn't feel that he can run something like that, not by himself, but just overall, he just doesn't feel like he is the leader type. And people's main concern with this movie as well was the CGI, which some of the stuff was a little off, but Marvel kind of goes for quantity over quality. Not most of the time, but recently, because you gotta look. Marvel and DC are different entities. DC seems to be taking their time with some things. They still have their universe, but they're not gonna pump out movie after movie every year. They're not gonna have like 7 or 8 movies and shows coming out in their universe at the same exact time. They want to give you time in between, and they want to make sure they're giving you the best product, because let's be honest, aside from maybe the Joss Whedon cut of Justice League,
Boo! You stink!
DC's effects in their movies in the DCEU have actually been pretty good. Like, they've been surprisingly done well and are doing a better job than the MCU when it comes to that in general. And with Thor, Love and Thunder, there was definitely some stuff that was off. I mean, even in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, his third eye just looked weird, looked unusual, not because it's a third eye, but it just looked misplaced with the way they did the CGI. And with Thor, there's that scene where he's contacting the one god's child because, Gore kidnapped all the kids to kind of, use that as a trap toward Thor to, come after them and get him so he can kill him. And it just looks off the way the kid is just depicted. His face is on screen, and it looks awful. And I get it, but at the same point in time, something like that isn't going to take me out of the movie completely, because the rest of the CGI wasn't really that bad. I mean, just looking at the rest of the movie, aside from that one part, I look at it and go, I don't think the CGI was terrible. I just think that one portion there was. But other than that, the CGI was done well. Like, there was nothing too obvious in this case. It was just kind of like, people overreact to some things. And it made me think to myself, this isn't this generation's Batman and Robin. I'll tell you what is. That's Morbius.
It's Morbin time.
I know, Morbius may not have predicted to be a big hit anyway, and trust me, it was not. But with it being in the Spider-Man universe, and it kind of maybe teasing something toward, hey, we're gonna have Spider-Man show up sooner or later in this universe, I thought that maybe people would really want to go see it. But the box office, it necessarily fail, but it didn't even make $200 million back at the box office, and it is ranked kind of around the same where Batman and Robin is ranked, even though Batman and Robin, I believe, is a 11%, Morbius is at about a 16 or 17%, and I have more problems with the CGI in that and the story overall than I do with Thor Love and Thunder, as Thor still seems pretty easy to follow, whereas Morbius, you kind of get lost in it, and it has a lot of boring, unmemorable moments that just don't do a whole lot. Yeah, Jared Leto does do a little bit of overacting, but that's just his thing. So it's like, if you come to expect more from Jared Leto, then, I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, he's got some good acting parts in other movies, but when it comes to his comic book portrayals, it has just been, well, he tries too hard, and that's his problem. He tries too hard to get us to like the character that he's portraying, and it doesn't work out well. And for me, Morbius is like the definitive Batman and Robin of this generation, because majority of people can agree this thing is terrible. I don't know who would spend their money to go see it.
Dumbass.
I don't agree with Thor. Thor was still pretty enjoyable, and to me better than the first 2 movies still. I mean, even though it's ranked around that area, the first 2 movies with the darker tone, I mean, Thor is a Norse god, so I guess it kind of makes sense that, he'd be, this tough, no-nonsense guy. But seeing Thor right around the time we got to Ragnarok, which was his return after he missed out on Civil War, and going into the last two Avengers movies and this movies, him as like the comedic relief, I think, is actually the right way to go with this character, because it shows you that even though he's this serious god, he needs to have a little bit of fun. And I think too, with the way they had his character toward the end of Phase 3 when all that was going on, he was losing a lot of people. He lost his whole goddamn, what do you call it, city, planet, or whatever. Asgard just got blown to bits by Thanos. So, he has to find a way to cope with that. So it all kind of just makes sense. Of course, there's the part where he just became so secluded and an alcoholic that he wouldn't talk to anybody except for the people he was living with. Again, he's lost his father, his brother, he broke up with his girlfriend, he lost Idris Elba's character, who for the life of me I cannot remember who it was. He lost his whole goddamn, planet. It just, like, him going through that, it's better than what happened with Superman when he killed Lois Lane and blew up all of Krypton after the Joker's little joke when he just went out and said, alright, no mercy, killing everybody. Like, at least Thor had a different way to cope with it, and I can say I enjoy it that way because he's just trying to make things better for himself, and it's, that way for a reason. Whereas with Batman and Robin, they tried to return to the campiness of the 60s cartoon, and I guess people thought it was a little bit too much because Batman Forever had been campy. So even Batman and Batman Returns went to the area of, like, Tim Burton campiness. But there was this, seriousness mixed in with it that, kind of channeled out the campiness more, and people were like, I'm okay with this. But with Batman and Robin, everything had to be a joke. But with Thor, it's not that way. And even with Morbius, it's not that way. I just think it's more on the lines of Batman and Robin with the story and all this kind of stuff in the CGI, where it just doesn't hold up, it doesn't pan out. And even Thor Love and Thunder made more at the box office combined than Batman and Robin and Morbius did. So, yeah, and again, I get it though, Thor is an MCU movie, so of course it's, gonna be up there in the box office, but the Thor Love and Thunder box office is probably the lowest the MCU's had box office-wise in a good bit, probably since early on in Phase 1, when nobody really knew how this was going to take off, or it could have been a movie like Black Widow or Eternals, one where a lot of people cared, but not enough people cared to, really, really make it go off at the box office. It's no offense to those movies. I liked Black Widow. Eternals was okay, but, I just wasn't interested in seeing them in theaters by the time they came out, because I just, I felt like with Black Widow it was too late to make a movie, and with Eternals I knew nothing about them, where I was like, I might need to do a little bit more research before going into the movie. It is what it is there. And, I guess I'll just really finish this video off by saying I don't understand the absolute hate for Thor Love and Thunder. Again, was it a perfect movie? No. Was it one of MCU's best movies? No. But my enjoyability, is that even a word? Did I make up that word? I don't know. It was fun in a lot of ways because, I like the soundtrack behind it being Guns N' Roses, and I feel like seeing Thor and Jane on screen together again was nice, and Valkyrie getting involved, it was nice. And plus Christian Bale, Jesus, he scared the shit out of me as Gore. That was a pretty good performance for him, considering he had no idea what he was even getting himself into when he joined the MCU with that role. So, you gotta give him credit there. The casting in this movie was pretty nice, and I think, excuse me if I'm saying his name wrong, Takia Waititi, I still don't know how to pronounce his name, in his second go-round with Thor, still made it feasible character, and definitely, wanted to keep the same intensity that Ragnarok had when it came to, like, comedic value, just to kind of keep the ante upped and make it more interesting than the first two Thor movies were. So I'll at least give it that. But when we're talking about, there's 29 MCU movies out now, I'd probably rank it somewhere like 16, 17, somewhere in the middle if I had to rank it, just because I can sit down and watch it again. I can sit down and watch it multiple times. It doesn't bother me. These Thor movies aren't even long. I don't think any of them crack the 2-hour mark, so it's just like I can sit down, I can watch it, and by the end of the movie, I think I'll be satisfied, other than those confusing end credit scenes, but there's more to come, so they're just setting that up. That's all that is. But I would really like to hear what you guys think in the comments below. Is Thor Love and Thunder really really this generation's Batman, or are people overreacting a bit and there's actually a current superhero movie that's a lot worse and deserves the title of being the 2020 equivalent of Batman and Robin. So yeah, that's it for me. Stay safe out there, wear your mask, get vaccinated, and I will catch you all in the next one.
You ever feel lost? Just look into the eyes of the people that you love. They'll tell you exactly who you are. All right, bye.